Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of The Impact Factor. The Impact Factor is what happens when two scientists and two best friends get together to talk about video games. My name is Alex Samocha, and I'm joined this week, as I will be every week here on The Impact Factor, by the man, the myth, the legend, my co-host, Charles Fliss.
How are you doing, everybody? Thanks for joining us.
Alright, before we get into any of this, the inaugural episode of The Impact Factor, some introductions are in order. As I just said, my name is Alex, and I'm a third-year biomedical sciences PhD candidate studying tissue development and cancer. I've been a scientist for a decade now. I've worked in labs since high school, and I love working and thinking about science. Video games, though, on the other hand, have been a part of my life for over 2 decades. The video game experiences I had growing up, and continue to have into adulthood, have shaped me. When I needed them to, games offered an escape, and other times games served as the foundation upon which I really first flexed my analytic muscles, the same ones I use in my science career. So understanding how and why game elements work, how the industry reacts to this exploding medium, and how games really affect the way I think are questions I really constantly ask myself. I figured it was about time to organize my thoughts and post them into a blog, and I've done so on The Impact Factor. But I wanted something more. I post weekly reviews, articles, and more there. But that wasn't enough for me. It really never is. So here we are, with an extension and evolution of that blog, and its content with this podcast, The Impact Factor. Ultimately, I hope to bring my history of gaming and my perspective as a research scientist and infuse them into the discussion of games. So, Fliss, time for your spiel.
All right, well, hey there. This is Charles Fliss. My gaming career started with a bright yellow Game Boy Color and has since included numerous consoles, handhelds, and even PCs. Games have always been a way for me to connect with other people, and it's largely through playing them that I have my closest friends. In college, I trained as a historical and cultural analyst and focused on the subcultural communities near and dear to my own heart. I'm always working to understand why we love games, how the games we love shape us, and how our gaming community is growing and changing. In other words, I'll be your social scientist for this podcast. My current laboratory is a junior high school in rural Japan, where I work as an assistant English teacher. In between sushi and local festivals, I still carve out time for my favorite games, and I hope to use my cultural and critical perspectives to jumpstart even more gaming discussions.
Alright, now that our robot introductions are out of the way, let's start to get things started for real. So let's jump into some news and views. In News and Views, Fliss and I scour through the week in video game news to find out the stories with the biggest impact. This could be from gaming on, consoles, PCs, even tabletop games. So Fliss, what do you think is the most impactful story from this week's news?
Well, on a personal level, the most impactful story for me is learning that Hearthstone has reached 30 million registered users. I'm pretty excited about that. And, Hearthstone it's great. It's awesome. Ever since you basically tied me down to the couch and made me download it, I haven't been able to put it down. So I'm pretty excited about seeing more people come to the game.
Yeah, would I have ever done something like that? No, but I'm really glad you're enjoying it. Hearthstone has been such an experience for me. I started it back. I was actually pretty late to the party. I joined in April of 2014, so a month or two after after its official release. Not really expecting much, we've both been big Magic fans our whole lives, and I wanted a card game that filled that niche without emptying my wallet. But Hearthstone just blew me away. It's simple, it's fun. The Blizzard did a great job of making it easy to pick up and play, easy to build your collection. It was one of those easy to learn, difficult to master kind of games, and I've been playing it now for over a year. And, it's only gotten better. If any of the listeners will recall, on the Impact Factor, it won my Game of the Year for 2014, and I really stand by that. It was the best game, and I think it will continue to be one of the best games, and certainly the best digital card game I've ever played.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that, especially with the success we're seeing with Blackrock Mountain as a single-player version of the game. That's very encouraging for me. I find a lot of times in PvP, in any game, I can become frustrated easily, and having that evolving single player is really, really exciting. And I thought Blackrock Mountain did a lot to improve the meta in the game, and that was really great to see for me, because with combo decks, you really need more cards. And so seeing more cards come to the game will be great for everyone. And then seeing more players especially with the release on phone, which is a big deal.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not surprised at all that I wouldn't be surprised at all, mind you, if the iPhone release and the Android iOS release was one of the driving factors to reach it, because it was announced just a couple months ago that Hearthstone had hit 25 million. So a 5 million boost in just a couple of months is pretty substantial. And I've heard so many anecdotal stories of someone, a lot of people in the games industry too, like, I'd heard about Hearthstone, I didn't want to jump into it. But then with the phone release, they're like, well, there's really nothing stopping me now from having it. Because some people don't have their tablets. Some people, I've heard that it's not a game necessarily they want to sit down and play when they want to sit down and have serious gaming time. But the phone, there's really like no excuse. And I've heard the UI is great. I would have Hearthstone on my phone if my phone was new enough to play it. That's a whole other issue. But 30 million new registered users is huge. I mean, if you compare that to the player base of even a game like Call of Duty, they're on a different level. I mean, keep in mind this is just registered users, and so we don't know how many are active or how active the active ones are. For example, there's a ranked system in Hearthstone, and I usually it goes from 25 to 1, and after that to Legend, and I usually get about rank 8 or 9. And it says that I'm in the top, 6% of players, even though there's still a large number of ranks after that. So, the level of activity people, I think, varies pretty drastically. But Hearthstone is so, has such a broad reach that it's 30 million people registered and signed up to play and have their account started. That's crazy to me.
Well, I can certainly vouch for how good the phone interface is. I've snuck off to hide out in the men's room more than once to finish a game in the middle of the day. And it's perfect. I'm sure there are ways that they could make it easier to use, but compared to other mobile games that have released, and certainly other mobile card games that have been attempted, I just think the way it works is fantastic. Have you tried it on tablet?
No, so I haven't tried it on tablet or on phone. I've heard the tablet interface is pretty much just a replication, and what I've seen, it's a replication of the PC interface, except, you can drag your cards with your finger instead of the mouse. But the phone, I've seen it, and it's so much different. Like, you need to tap to reveal your hand, but I mean, for a game that feels as large as Hearthstone to be on the phone and work seamlessly on the phone, from everything I've heard and seen, I mean, that's an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the phone interface, the biggest problem that I've run into is just that your hero portrait, which you do interact with, of course, in the game, is it's kind of off the screen, and it can be beneath your hand, if you will, which means that if you have a lag in your phone, you can do something really embarrassing, like fireball your face, which I would, of course, know nothing about. I've never made that mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you haven't. That explains the couple of hunters I've seen which quick shot their own face. But, I mean, face hunter's so good, I still usually lose, so.
And let's be honest, I mean, seeing a face hunter quick shot himself in the face is just like cosmic justice.
It is, but then they'll still draw a card, so.
Right, yeah.
it's never a full win.
That's absolutely right.
Great, man. So, one of the stories that I really thought kind of had the biggest impact this week is just all of this E3 press conference news that's been kind of exploding from every corner of the industry. So this thing's been it's kind of been a stone that's rolling down a hill, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. I think we're at what now? 8 E3 press conferences? Let's see if I can rattle them off. On the Sunday before E3, so that's June 15. And again, for any listeners, E3 is the Electronic Entertainment Expo. It's the biggest U.S. conference for video games. So there's the Bethesda press conference on Sunday night. You've got your standard suite of press conferences on Monday with Microsoft in the morning, EA, then Ubisoft, and then Sony at night. And then on Tuesday, there's going to be Nintendo and Square Enix, as well as the most recently announced PC Gamer will have their own PC press conference, though the details of exactly what that is are still up in the air. And so, what do you think this means? So usually we had our usual suite of 5, but now, with Bethesda and Square Enix jumping on board, what do you think this means?
Well, I think this means I'm going to be getting up at an absolutely ridiculous hour of the night to watch these streams. They're all streaming between about, 1 in the afternoon until about 7 at night Pacific time. And that works out to like, man, maybe I'll just be cutting work. I'm gonna have to check the schedule, but Japan time is crazy. But for me, on a personal level, I'm super excited. I think that E3 getting better, bigger and better can only be good because companies are gonna push each other to make better press conferences, to make better releases, and to have more for the fans who come to the show. So I'm incredibly excited. I'm a little disappointed in Nintendo, which is going to be a running theme, I think, because we're seeing even PC, and I believe that the PC Gamer is partnering with AMD, right, to put on that conference.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the AMD's that the computer parts and especially graphics card company.
Right, right. And so we're seeing, the graphics and PC gamers reporting coming together to work with a bunch of different developers to hopefully make some really cool announcements in the PC conference. And Nintendo's still going to probably just show us a video. And that's, or, have some sort of just mild video presentation. At best we'll get a new amiibo or something. So I think this is a pretty dramatic demonstration of how important E3 is in the gaming community and of where these things are going. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Yeah, E3 is getting bigger and bigger, it seems, and it's already such a tremendously large event. It still kind of blows me away that it still has this place to grow. But I think what we're seeing here is now that the publishers don't necessarily, the console makers don't necessarily control the whole narrative of E3 anymore, right? Because Bethesda realizes the power of its franchises, so we're probably going to see something from their new Doom game. I wouldn't be surprised if they talk a little bit about their new Wolfenstein expansion that just came out, The Old Blood. Everyone is anticipating Fallout 4, and I think there could be legitimate, actual riots in at the press conference if Fallout 4 isn't announced. And then Square Enix too. They realize they have a big swath of games, and they must be pretty confident in their releases. I'm sure we'll see more from the new Deus Ex game. Was it Mankind? I don't know. I forget the subtitle, but
Mankind Overloaded.
The first one. Yeah, so it's exactly, yeah. But because they've already said they're not going to even talk about Final Fantasy 15. They're saving that probably for the Tokyo Game Show, and so. Square Enix has got its own pull there. But one of the things I'm concerned about, I love press conferences. The more press conferences, the better. Yearly I make an event. I'm sick those days from work to stay home and go through it. I've been live tweeting it. And, keep an eye on the Impact Factor. We're going to be doing a lot of content when E3 comes around. But there's already been overlap between some of the content that's shown in the press conferences, right? So it was either last year or the year before that, Assassin's Creed was shown at the Xbox One press conference, and they showed the cooperative, part of their cooperative suite from Assassin's Creed Unity. But then at the Ubisoft press conference, since Assassin's Creed is such their marquee game, they showed Assassin's Creed 2, and albeit they showed just some single player content, but it's already kind of tiresome. Seeing the same game at several press conferences is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that you always want to see more and new and different. And I fear now, especially with the PC gamer one, are we just going to see titles that we've seen released and announced at other press conferences? Is it going to be? They haven't really gone into a lot of details. Is it more like what we've seen from GameSpot or IGN, where it's more hands-on with the writers of PC Gamer talking with developers rather than actual stage show. There's a lot that's up in the air and a lot that could be done, but that's one of my concerns I have coming in. I'd rather not see the new Call of Duty game 3 different times.
Well, I'm hopeful for the PC press conference because they are trying something new, and like you said, we're seeing this shift away from the big console and first-party development announcements in terms of controlling, like you said, controlling the narrative of the show. And with the PC gaming show conference being announced, I think we'll hopefully see more developer voices at E3, and that can only be a good thing. And maybe this year, they're going to be figuring out what they're doing, and I think we, as fans, need to cut them some slack. and need to say that this is their test run, and give them a chance to maybe make a few good announcements. That's a super long conference, right? Like the PC Gamer one, it's like 3 hours or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's huge. It's
so
huge.
we maybe they're going to be figuring it out, and there's going to be problems, and I think we need to cut them some slack. And in terms to speak to overlap, yeah, I mean I'm really worried about that. I've lost track of how many Assassin's Creed games there are now. As much as I've been enjoying them, I'm behind. I'm definitely behind on those. So I mean, if we're seeing the same footage from Microsoft and Ubisoft, yeah, that'll be frustrating. If we can see, different aspects of the game announced across different conferences, then I'll be more willing to cut them some slack. I'll also be very much willing to give them more slack if they're showing us different capabilities and they're running things on the actual system. I don't want to hear that, this is a PC set to Xbox One capabilities, and we're seeing this footage that's, maybe being run with a processor that's, like 8 times the speed of an Xbox One. So if they're running it on their own console, I'll be willing to give them more room.
I mean, Ubisoft is guiltier than any at like, oh look, here is our new Xbox One footage. Asterisk. We have a PC running this in the background. But I mean, that's a good point. They did show different demos, and for games, I'm sure for people who are excited about Assassin's Creed, that's something they really, the more content, the better, because you usually will get one trailer and one gameplay snippet that's shown all around the web of a certain game, and then you have to wait for more news. What I'm excited about, especially for the console manufacturers, Nintendo, to a lesser extent, but Microsoft and Sony, is bringing out more of these independent games. So exclusives are obviously great, and they've got to be on the horizon for both consoles, because if we look at this year, Sony doesn't have announced any exclusive first-party titles that are going to come out in 2015. Bloodborne was the last one, and so that could be Sony resting on its laurels with its great sale figures, but I don't think that's the case. And so I'm expecting some exclusive announcements, and I think we can get into that later. We have an E3 predictions episode. But what I'd like to see is more of the independent game scene. Sony has its Pub Fund program where it gives money to independent, smaller developers to bring their games to Sony. Xbox has its ID at Xbox initiative to bring smaller developers. And so we've been seeing that more, independent and smaller titles coming to the stage at E3. And I think that's important. They're such a huge part of the industry now. I'd like to see them featured in a bigger way. It's a whole different argument. So sick of people, Indie Station 4 and that whole nonsense. But I think that's a way that they could avoid some of that. If they're not showing the new Fallout game at Sony, or they're not showing the new, Assassin's Creed game at Xbox, spend some of that time with smaller titles like, anything, honestly. I mean, I expect we'll see No Man's Sky again at PS4, but even smaller titles than that, the new next upcoming game from developers, because that part of the industry is so exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the way gaming has changed from when we were growing up in terms of the way indie games can, and I use that term somewhat loosely, can be released and come straight to PSN or come straight to Xbox Live is very exciting. And a lot of my favorite games from the past several years have been those kinds of games where you wouldn't buy it on a disc and you download it straight from PSN. Papa and Yo comes to mind right away for me in that regard. I mean, what was your favorite indie game of the past year or two?
Oh gosh, I mean, just in the past couple of months, I loved Shovel Knight. I guess I got that for PS4 and played it on both the PS4 and Vita, and that game is just phenomenal. But I'm totally into that whole scene. There's so many that I want to pick up on. I still haven't picked up and played Titan Souls or Axiom Verge or Hotline Miami 2. Even those are huge gaps in my backlog. But there's just so many, and they do so many exciting things. So I would like to see them featured even more strongly. Just kind of the last bit about this. You said earlier, which I totally agree with, that E3 is becoming increasingly important, but I think it's also becoming kind of increasingly singularly important for that summer time slot, because we're getting more and more press conferences and more conferences where news is released, with Penny Arcade Expos, with Sony has its own now fan event, the PlayStation Experience, which happens in December. And so many other conferences. Developers really need to kind of control developers and publishers really need to control how and when their news is released, because if they're trying to bring something new to every press conference, they'll never get anything done. It's impossible. So kind of, along with all these E3 press conference news, Sony just announced the other day that they're not going to have a press conference at Gamescom, which is like the E3 for Europe. It's, but except that it's open to the public. So they get around 375,000 people visit this event. And so Sony has usually had a pretty big presence there especially with their European studios, like the Guerrilla Games, the team behind Killzone, or Media Molecule, the team behind Little Big Planet. And so they announced that they're not even going to have a press conference there, but are rather going to be probably presenting their European developer games at Paris Games Week, which is in October. And so some of the issue with Gamescom, right, is it's in August. And so June to August is a pretty short window. And with Sony PlayStation Experience in December, they're really kind of trying to control the flow of content. So it's going to be interesting to see what news gets broken out into everything. E3 seems to be bigger and bigger, but, maybe some of the content we would normally see there is going to be spread out to Gamescom for these other studios, or it's just it's such a rapidly evolving thing, and I think it's a balancing act for publishers and developers to know exactly when and what to show of a game.
Well, I think there's definitely a kind of rolling stone gathering moss effect happening for some of these conferences, and we could look at that both ways, right? That some of them are growing bigger and bigger, and others are fading away. Certainly, you mentioned it earlier, but Tokyo Game Show is one that used to be like one of the conferences that you would have, or one of the places you would get big announcements. And it's almost just a fan convention now in terms of how much it's faded into the background. I mean, I got the opportunity to go there 2 years ago. Hopefully, be able to go back again this year, and it was nothing compared to what you see at E3 or even at a Penny Arcade Expo. And the Xbox booth, obviously Microsoft's presence in Japan is next to nothing when stacked up next to Sony, but the Xbox booth was pretty pathetic, and even the PlayStation area was really small. And the most exciting thing then, right, was because this was right at the launch of PS4, was just a few very short demos. And that was it. That was all you got at Tokyo Game Show. So where we're seeing E3 get bigger and bigger, we're seeing some of the older conferences and game shows start to kind of fade into the background. And, in some ways that's pretty sad. So obviously got to enjoy the hype train for E3 as much as we can to kind of get us over the loss of some of these formerly great shows.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens at Tokyo Game Show, right? Because, yeah, exactly, it's what you said. We've seen it's just become a fan conference, just exclusive titles that Japan would be interested in. And, I mean, it's certainly kind of reflective of what's happening with console gaming over in Japan, right? I mean, the PS4 is selling better than the Xbox One there. Again, I don't even know if the Xbox One is there. But it's still, pretty pathetic sales, even what was expected. And so, the console gaming is really, I don't want to say it's not dead in Japan, but it's certainly kind of on its death now. And I don't really know what can be done to invigorate it. I mean, you're over there, so, this is probably a different topic. But from everything I've seen, it's, mobile gaming on phones and mobile gaming on handhelds like, the 3DS that really is, the core of Japanese gaming. And beyond that, it's more niche.
Well, the really exciting thing in Japanese gaming is the vitality of arcade culture that still happens here. You could go to Tokyo and still find an arcade. Obviously, there are fewer than there were in the past, and a lot of people are lamenting the slow decline of that. But compared to the basically non-existent arcade culture in the United States, that's still quite exciting. But you're absolutely right in the mobile gaming, handheld gaming is the flood here. It's what's happening, and they're making some really exciting games and some improvements in those realms. On a very personal level, I'm psyched to see Mario meet Puzzle Dragons, which is going to be awesome on 3DS.
Yeah, that's huge there in Japan.
So, and we could talk about probably another time why that's happening, but obviously the aging population is a huge part of that, in that there just aren't as many young people to pick up and get hooked on consoles. And if you look at when we started console gaming, we've been doing this since we were kids, and there just aren't as many kids right now. So
Yeah,
it's hard to fix that. That's a much
yeah,
larger social problem. Yeah, I want
definitely. All right,
to.
before we get way too off track,
Yeah. Sorry.
what are their news stories?
Well, before we fly away from Japan, I want to talk about big news from Nintendo. Um, First of all, posting a profit for the first time in forever is a huge and very encouraging sign out of that company.
Yeah, I want to just cut you off right there, though. So, how much of that do you think is the amiibo craze that is happening? Because Nintendo, they're not really seeing any games. I don't know where their profits
Well,
coming
I
from.
absolutely think Amiibo is driving it, and it's something that I'm having a really hard time understanding because I look at Amiibo and I think, man, this is something I would have loved like 10 years ago. And I'm still really excited about some of them. I'm like really hoping that the reissue that they just announced will include Captain Falcon, because right now the Captain Falcon Amiibo is sitting at about $50 on Amazon. I'm just not willing to do that.
Oh my god, that's yeah, the prices are out of control for these amiibos because of this false scarcity that Nintendo insists on as their business model. We saw it with the Wii, and we see it with the amiibos. They limit how much is out there just to drive up prices. I mean, right? That's what they got to be
Well,
doing.
and with the Wii, obviously that was a gigantic faceplant. But with Amiibo, it seems to be working. I mean, people are stampeding each other at Toys R Us to get their hands on an Amiibo. And I mean, I like Mario, but he's not worth dying for.
But he's golden if you get the GameSpot exclusive or silver now. They announced the silver Mario amiibo.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a beautiful lineup. I'm just wondering when we're going to get the bronze Amiibo. Where are we going to get bronze Mario so you can have your Olympic collection? Will that be the 2020 release, Olympic collection Mario?
I mean, they're going to still make Mario games, so right, it's got to be inevitable. It's going to happen. They're going to have something. But the appeal with the amiibos too. Again, I guess we're getting a little off topic, but they have such limited functionality too, right? So the people who are collecting them, it's predominantly as a collector's item. This gets into a whole other topic with these collectible toys, but at least in games like Skylanders and Disney Infinity, the toys have much more functionality in game. But the only instances I've heard, are Smash Brothers, where they are kind of like a glorified kind of NPC that works for you, but not even that. They're just kind of an AI that gets stronger. And so the appeal seems to be 100% collectors who want to show off their Nintendo fan base, fandom.
Well, and I think for Smash Brothers, obviously the appeal lies in that it's basically a trainable AI. I know that there was an article on Kotaku quite some time ago where they talked about training their amiibos over a period of a couple months and then just running them and watching it like a sporting event. And that actually sounds awesome to me. But you're right, there's a very limited functionality. And I think that Nintendo really trades on that collector appeal. I mean, can you imagine Sony trying to run something like Amiibo? I mean, we saw how PlayStation All Stars didn't work. Can you imagine, like, buy our Sackboy figure, buy Solid Snake? Oh, excuse me, I'm dying here, but go ahead.
I mean, I like PS Battle Royale has a special place in my heart. It's not the best game, but I mean, if Sony could get back licenses to all of its exclusive properties, I mean, I could see myself buying a Crash Bandicoot figure. That'd be awesome. Or if they, the kind of the characters that are associated with PlayStation, like I could see myself getting a Cloud. But yeah, I mean, it'd be more
but
difficult.
You don't have that same kind of Nintendo nostalgia, do you? Right? Because you've been a pretty hardcore Sony guy most of your life, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, no, my first Nintendo console was the Game Boy Pocket, and I mean, I never had the NES, I never had the SNES, because my parents tried to fight as long as possible for me to get into gaming, It wasn't until I bought the PS1 that I actually had a console. That was my first console. So, yeah, I mean, I have less nostalgia for the Nintendo's franchises. But just getting back to it, so what do you think this profit means for Nintendo, right? So are they going to try and course correct on the Wii U? And, there's been talk about the Nintendo NX as their new console. So do you think they're going to try and go this hardcore route that so many of us want them to go with, 1080p, 60 frames per second gameplay, having the same third-party titles come to, whatever the Nintendo NX is? Or, they obviously see what's working for them. The toys are working for them. The handheld is working for them. The Wii U has, it's got good games, but there's so few of them, and the sales are abysmal. So, do you think Nintendo is gonna put another genuine push into this hardcore console market, or what are they gonna do? Because its profit's great.
I mean, I think Nintendo's business model is very indicative of a kind of Japanese corporate mindset where there's a real focus on gadgetry. If you look at a lot of the great products that come out of Japan, it's been these kinds of gadgets, and that's part of why I think handheld gaming is taking over here, because people love having the newest smartphone, and that's what's popular. That's cool. But I think that we've seen that basically since the GameCube, where we've got mini discs, and now we've got motion control with Wii, and now Amiibo are the hot thing, where we've got a gamepad that's basically a less functional tablet for the Wii U, and it's this focus on a gimmick to sell their console. And I think for us who identify as hardcore gamers, that's really frustrating, because I look at Wii, which my family did buy, and we had a lot of fun, but it never really delivered what we wanted. And the Wii U, I have not bought one, because I still feel like it's that one great game away from making me want it. I want to play Smash 4. I want to train an Amiibo in Smash 4. I want to play a Bowser Party with you and everybody else. But it's not. That's not enough. That's not enough to deliver and make me buy it. So where they're going next is really hard to say. I'm hopeful that we will see a real console kind of. It sounds terrible, but a real console kind of with the gadgets as bonuses, right? Because if you could tell me that you were going to have motion control the way we kind of saw with PlayStation Move as an attempt, where it was a bonus add-on to having a fully functional console, I'd be much more willing to invest in that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, but I mean that's great in a market where so many companies and publishers are struggling. I mean, we've seen this recent reinvigoration of profitability. Like obviously, Sony as a company isn't profitable, but the PlayStation division's been doing great. Despite kind of getting beaten out by PS4 so far in this generation, Xbox One has been still selling gangbusters. It's still one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and that's got to be boosting the Microsoft Games division. So I mean, there's that profitability there still in console gaming, and so I'll be interested to see where Nintendo goes in the future, right? Because the new Nintendo 3DS is certainly not a direction I expected them to take, but it looks at least tentatively like it paid off, that people were ready to buy another 3DS, even if it's just marginally more powerful, and you've got the addition of the Z-Stick. I mean, it's Nintendo confuses me. I don't understand their business decisions. I don't understand a lot about the decisions they've made pretty much since the Wii era, but it looks like it's paying off for them for the first time in a long time. Post Wii, it looks like some pretty dark days. No big game releases on their home console. But I mean, I guess the 3DS has been killing it. The 3DS's library is great, and they've got a lot of great games.
Yeah, I think 3DS has benefited from that library, and I think it's benefited from the legacy that it's kind of had here, where the original DS, if we go back far enough, kind of got gamers accustomed to that system, and it gave developers a time to figure out how to use it, and it gave Nintendo a time to really, really kill it with their first-party games, which has always been their bread and butter. So 3DS is really winning the handheld market right now, which is really impressive given how great Vita's library is becoming, especially with all the free Vita games on PlayStation Plus.
Yeah, I mean, you said it's his bread and butter, but it's more than that. It's the bread, it's the butter, it's the jam, it's the roast beef, it's the entire kitchen. They don't have third-party games. That's all they have. But I mean, there's such that pronounced fandom for their titles and for their games that it keeps them afloat. And not only keeps them afloat, it keeps them profitable.
Yeah, which I think is a surprise to a lot of people. It certainly took me off guard when I saw that news.
And I mean, we haven't heard any reports of Nintendo trimming fat, laying off developers. I mean, maybe they've kept this more under wraps, but so it's not like they got lean to go into the black. They're doing something right. So I don't know. I guess Nintendo's got the last joke on all of us. All of us complaining that the Wii U doesn't have enough games, that the Wii U is a horrible name. It's not a good console. Who knows?
Yeah, Nintendo continues to mystify.
We'll see what they have for the Nintendo Direct, because, I mean, they've got Star Fox coming up. So I'm sure since Star Fox is still supposed to be released before, during Holiday 15, that's going to have a presence. But is Star Fox really the game all of us are clamoring for? We wanted the new Legend of Zelda game, but that's been pushed out to 2016. I can't even imagine them talking about it. They're probably going to go dark until much later.
I've from everything I've seen about new Star Fox, it doesn't even seem to be the game that Star Fox fans are clamoring for. Basically, what a lot of Star Fox fans, myself included, want is we want to play Star Fox 64 with better graphics, new levels, and a few new mechanics to make our R-Wing, flying even better. And Nintendo has insisted on going back to this ground game, like in Star Fox Assault, which is fun. It's a good game, or at least it's an enjoyable game, but it's not what you want from a Star Fox game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That kind of to move to the next topic, but keep in mind Nintendo, this kind of action, mascot platformer again. So there's been huge news on the mascot platformer thing. Think about the N64. So just this week, there was a Kickstarter for the spiritual successor for Banjo-Kazooie called Yooka-Laylee. It's from a team of former Rare developers, the guys who were behind some of these huge games from back in the day, Nintendo 64. I mean, they were the team behind Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, and GoldenEye, some of the games that everyone raves about on Nintendo 64. The team behind Donkey Kong Country. But yeah, so they've got a couple of those Rare developers. They've got the composer, Grant Kirkhope, and they've got a whole huge team together for this new, 3D action platformer. And they set their goal to £375 for just the most basic level of funding on Kickstarter. And within 24 hours, they had amassed £1.2 million, tripling their goals, reaching all their stretch goals. And so, this is huge. So people... I mean, it's certainly a combination of people's love for Banjo-Kazooie as a franchise, and it's been so long since there's been a good Banjo-Kazooie game. I mean, let's not even get into nuts and bolts. Like, it's terrible.
Let's not discuss that at all. Let's just move right along.
So there are no nuts and bolts. But yeah, I mean, so especially because Rare, the Rare that still exists and is owned, it's a first party developer for Microsoft. They've been kind of producing weird games. They've been working on the Kinect Sports franchise, which, people enjoy, but it's a Kinect Sports game. It's, clearly just trying to riff off of, Wii Sports, but that's, almost a decade old now. And so, they hadn't been doing a lot that, at least the more, again, hardcore audience were interested in. And I think it goes to show that people still want these kind of games, and there's such this fuel for nostalgia that I think that these former Rare devs really jumped on at the right time to kind of capitalize on this clamor for a new Banjo-Kazooie game.
Well, I'm definitely on board with this. I loved Banjo-Kazooie. I really, really hope that they can go through, but at the same time, I'm extremely nervous about this project. I'm nervous every time I see developers put their reputation on the line on Kickstarter. I think we've seen so many disappointments come out of that, and so many things that even if they were pretty good, didn't live up to the hype. And it's hard with Kickstarter, right? Because people are basically buying hype. That's what you're buying when you fund a Kickstarter project. So I'm hopeful. I want Yooka-Laylee to be awesome. I want it to just be, this amazing throwback to Banjo-Kazooie, but I'm at the same time really worried about it.
Yeah. So Kickstarter is such a mixed bag, right? Because, I mean, just a game I talked about at the beginning of the show, Shovel Knight was a Kickstarter game. And it's phenomenal. So many people had it as in their top 5 games of the year last year when it released for PC and the 3DS. And, now that I've played through it myself, it's a phenomenal game. And there's been more and more successes. I mean, we've got Mighty Number 9, which is a Kickstarter game by Kenji Inafune, the guy behind Mega Man, and that's announced to be coming out in September, and that is looking great. But there was such a long, kind of dark period in Kickstarter game history where, the games, they would get funded but never come out, or they come out in this weird, different form, and it wasn't great. But I'm getting increasingly confident. Again, I think it needs to be perfectly clear for every Kickstarter donor or everyone who thinks about it. Kickstarter isn't a promise of anything. It's not even an investment per se in the company. You're donating to people that you like in the hopes of getting something. I think that's where people I think that's where you need that logical leap, right? You're not investing in a company. You're not an investor. You're not guaranteeing the success or the exact product that's promised. What you're doing is you're giving your money as a donation to people who you have confidence in and who you think will be able to follow through on their promises. And I think, especially looking at this team, they've got a lot of pretty raw talent on this team and a lot of people from these original titles. And so, again, I haven't, just as a point of disclosure, I haven't invested any money into any Kickstarter project. Right? I love what it does for the most part, but I save my money for when the game comes out, and so I can make my mind on the final product. But I think Yooka-Laylee has a pretty good chance of success.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful for Yooka-Laylee, and again, also full disclosure here, I am not a donor on any Kickstarters whatsoever, and I'm with you. I want to see the final product, and I want to be able to make my judgment then.
Yep, 2 broke scientists and no spare money to invest in potential pipe dreams.
Speaking of pipe dreams and spending your money before you even know what you're getting, how about that $40 season pass that they want for Arkham Knight?
Oh, God, they at least responded, Rocksteady and WB responded to some of the criticism, right? Because it was announced, I think, last week, and then over this past weekend, Rocksteady came out, is criticized because they, again, just to kind of clarify for anyone who's listening who doesn't know the story, WB and Rocksteady announced that there would be a $40 season pass for Arkham Knight, and then, if you wanted to, you could buy this special premium deluxe edition day one for $100, the base game and the season pass. And just, in general, $40 is quite expensive for a season pass. We've seen a lot of them around the $20 range, and some up to even the $30 range, but this is $40 is the highest I've seen for a season pass. And then in the press release, when this was first announced, the details were sparse. We knew there would be costumes, so cosmetic content. They hinted at challenge rooms like had been in the previous Arkham games, and then suggested there would be some story content. But what exactly did that mean? And if that's $40, that's a huge risk. But then, Rocksteady came out over the weekend and posted that there would be playable story content, there would be challenge rooms, there would be some costumes, but then one of the story pieces in particular allows you to play as Batgirl, right? And I think you were telling me right before we started recording that they have officially announced that this Batgirl is Barbara Gordon. And so this brings up, a whole other slew of questions.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Barbara Gordon announcement. Obviously I'm not thrilled that they want $40 up front to be able to guarantee you can play it. But we already know from other Arkham games, not going to spoil anything too hard here because you learned this about the first 5 minutes of the first game, but that it does use a timeline in which Barbara Gordon is Oracle. And so obviously this raises a lot of questions about what kind of a story they intend to tell with a Barbara Gordon Batgirl prequel.
Yeah, right. There's a lot they could do with the whole Killing Joke timeline that's, pretty brutal, and I know, a lot of people are fans of, and I've kind of, skimmed over, but it's, they could go pretty dark and pretty nasty with it, and I think that's going to be a balancing act too, right? Because this is, I think, as a series first, Arkham Knight is going to be mature, rated mature by the ESRB, and so that could certainly be a part of it. But no, I'm tentatively excited. I don't see myself buying the $40 season pass. I assume at some point the Batgirl DLC is probably going to be released as a standalone piece of content. Though I wouldn't be surprised if it's $15, $20, which is a whole other thing. It's hard. A lot of these days you're going to have, there's these DLC that don't really feel like worth the money you spend into it. But I'm tentatively excited. Arkham Asylum and Arkham City are great games. They're the best comic book superhero games I've played on consoles. They get Batman so right. That combat is so fun and so groundbreaking in the industry. Every third-person action game now is using this Batman combat system of the perfectly timed dodges and the exploration's great. They fit so much, into their worlds. And so, I mean, I've been excited for Arkham Knight a long time. I'm going to pick up the game when it comes out, but I'm still not confident for the people who are investing in the season pass that it's really going to be worth your money. My plan at least is to play the wait and see game and then pick up things as piecemeal, like this Batgirl expansion.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where they'll go with it. I wonder if they will be brave enough to really go in to the Killing Joke, and I think it would be very interesting to see how kind of hardcore Batman fans would react to playing through the Killing Joke as Batgirl. Obviously that story is pretty graphic, it's pretty intense, and doing that even in a third-person viewpoint would be really hardcore for a game to do. And I'm hoping they're going to be brave enough to try that, to venture out into that, because I think that would really be, you want to talk about breaking new ground in storytelling and in the way we use games. I think that would be a really great thing to do.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Breaking new ground, like the new Tomb Raider reboot was pretty. Lara Croft went through some pretty brutal stuff. So I mean, we've seen a little bit of that recently, and I mean, there are our own slate of issues that get into kind of the brutality. But I mean, again, I'm mixed about it. I kind of like that the female characters are, kind of saying the same things the male protagonists are. But
well, I think one of the problems with what Tomb Raider did, and we're going to jump briefly, off topic here, but one of the problems with Tomb Raider was that it was very voyeuristic in the way you're playing Lara Croft in those very vulnerable situations. And I think what upset a lot of people, myself included, is that Lara Croft has been traditionally one of the most kick-ass characters in gaming, male or female. And to see her, put in those situations in a way that doesn't really make you, the player, vulnerable was very frustrating, and I think that angered a lot of people. So they're going to be walking a really, really fine line if they decide to go through with the Killing Joke. And I'm hopeful that they could do it in a way that is not voyeuristic and does horrify the player and really connects you to that character more and to that experience more, which is, I think, something that the gaming community could use right now.
For sure. No, I'm excited to see where they go for it, and that's, one of the best things I think they could show, one of the most exciting things certainly they could show after they announced this kind of ludicrous price tag for the DLC. So yeah, those are the stories that we really thought were the most impactful from this week's news, but we'd love to hear from the community the news items that you guys thought had the biggest impact. So feel free to shoot us an email at impactfactorpodcast@gmail.com. If a story is worth talking about, we'll talk about it. So now it's time to put things in perspective. Perspectives is part of the show where, any number of things can happen. It's a revolving section where we experiment with what's worth discussing. Usually, Fliss and I will pick out an editorial piece and discuss it together, as we're going to do today. So let's get started. So, you sent me an email, and this is a pretty great piece. So tell me a little bit about the piece that we've chosen for Perspectives.
Okay, well, great, man. Yeah, I was really excited when I read this, and I'm glad that you wanted to talk about it. Today's article is called What It's Like to Crunch on a Video Game. It was featured on Kotaku. By Jason Schreier, and in it he takes a blog post from Brett Duville, who talks about, as a developer, what it's like to go through the end of the development process, those last few weeks where you're in the crunch, that push to get a game finished, and the toll that takes on you mentally and physically, and then the toll that, having released the game, seeing the reviews of all your blood, sweat, and tears, which can be kind of crushing, and what that's like. So I thought it was a very moving piece that really shined a light on what it's like to be a part of the industry.
Yeah, so I read through it, and it's a great piece. I mean, you hear stories like this all the time, right? That, DeVille and others have, when you get into crunch time and you need a game that's released, I mean, the developers put in, 80-hour weeks easy. But there's, an emotional and a physical toll that comes along with it. So in the article, DeVille described his experience on picking up another developer's work. And so his story is a unique one too, right? Because instead of crunching for the last, month and a half, he crunched for 6 months, 7 months, because he had taken on another programmer's work who had to leave the team for personal reasons. But yeah, in his, blog post, he describes this physical fatigue, this kind of exhaustion of his entire being, where he, nearly collapsed at a store that he was at, and was fueled pretty much just by soda and saltines to keep his body moving and get back to the office. And I think it's important to kind of recognize, it's very easy for us as people who talk about video games and think about video games to kind of forget some of the work that goes into it. Now, to be fair, I don't think this should preclude criticism of games. I think it's important to understand what works and what doesn't, just to make the medium more successful and a more rich place. But, it's very easy to criticize people who, basically give their life away to make some of these games that are released.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about getting to a Safeway and just not even being able to move out of his car. And what struck me even more than that story is the fact that he says that he never found out what happened. He still doesn't know to this day. Whether it was just cumulative exhaustion, whether it was something else that was more serious. And I mean, that is an intense level of physical breakdown to get a game done. And so certainly, like you said, we have to be fair in our criticism. We have to be honest in how we feel about games, and we have to continue to push how we talk about games. But I think there's also a real call here in his writing to think before you hit post, to think, to maybe read it one more time and say, am I being unnecessarily cruel in the way I'm writing? And I think certainly right now, there's a real danger in games journalism to use that rage, to fuel things with outrage and venom to get page views. That we really need to be careful of the impact that that's taking on real people.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of a piece that came out in Kotaku, I think a couple months ago, by the head writer for Borderlands 2, who described his experiences in game development. He had been a game critic for a while. He's had worked with his sister on the Hey Ash, What You Playin' series of videos. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah, I like those.
But in his work at Destructoid, he described himself as very a lot of hate. I hate this thing. I don't like this. He spewed a lot of vitriol. But then he got in the studio, and he got to Gearbox and started working on Borderlands 2, and he realized the work and the crunch and the how maddening it is to work on a game. He described it as, I can't even imagine how stressful it gets, because in his descriptions, and I'm sure what DeVille experienced in his his own history with development, is that a game is a broken piece of, it's a broken piece of crap until like a couple weeks before you go gold. Like nothing seems to work together. You can't tell if it's fun. You don't know if people are going to like it, because so many different parts have to come together to make the whole. And so I think that adds a whole nother level of stress that we don't even really talk about. You're working for months and months on a game, and you don't even know what it's like. I mean, you don't know if it's fun, you don't know if it's good, but you just have to be confident that the directions you're taking and the design that you're following is good. And so I could see then, I think one of the points that really resonated the strongest in his article was that, these developers are getting hit with the reviews right when they're their most vulnerable, right? You've gotten through the hurdle, you've pushed, your body, in DeVille's case, is falling apart, and then it's finally out. You have time to relax. You can start your state of zen, and then you start getting, this game's a piece of garbage. People who made it should feel bad. It's, reductive for gaming. And so you hit it when they're their most vulnerable. And so I think, the point you made is really important. And what I've tried to do on the Impact Factor is, even when I'm critical of a game, understand that this isn't reflective on the developers themselves. It's just, design decisions, right? What is effective in the design, what works and what doesn't, or acknowledging that despite the work done into it, there still are flaws that could be addressed. And less so, I hate the developers, they're dumb, they have nothing new to offer to games, something along those lines. And I think it's really important, especially with a community that can be so vitriolic, to try and tone that down.
Well, I think we've certainly hit a point in gaming spaces with places like Reddit, other, certainly 4chan has been able to do this for a long time, where the gaming community can get together in concentrated forums and build each other up. And those groups can also really be used to take people down. And we've hit a point where there's so many people interested in gaming, and it's so cool that we have all these people coming to the community that game developers are becoming celebrities in their own right. And just like sports stars or celebrities who are celebrities just for being famous, like the Kardashians, or like movie stars, there comes a point where people have trouble separating the person from their work. You know, we saw this in sports recently with the big boxing match, right? Where neither of the guys fighting in that are really perfect stand-up gentlemen by any stretch of the imagination. But it doesn't mean they're not.
Yeah, you could say that again.
Yeah. Whoa. But, they're still great boxers. And so, no matter what you feel about them as a person, you have to acknowledge that they're a great boxer. And so I think the problem is that we're seeing kind of an inverse problem where you have these game developers who might be really, really good people and maybe have a few bugs in their game. And people say, like you said, that you're a bad person and you should feel bad because you had bugs in your game and you're a worthless human being. And I think that's why we're seeing so many developers leaving Twitter, leaving social media. Now that's tragic in a development world where so many of these developers started as fans, and we shouldn't be driving them away from their own community.
Yeah, it's been a pretty gross time in games, and that's a whole slew of other topics. But I think it's important to realize that they're people. It's an art. Everything is constantly evolving and getting better, and just acknowledge the toll. Not to say that this is a unique experience for games, and I'm sure as both you and I can attest to, when you're trying to kill a project and get that done, the time commitment you put into it, is reflective of the need to get it done. You just have to push. And so though it's not unique to games, I think this kind of public facing, again, as this is kind of an entertainment industry, everyone feels qualified, including to a social scientist and a biomedical scientist, feels qualified to comment and talk and criticize on these things. And so, the work that you and I do, we push and it's hard and we get it out, but we'll get feedback from a committee of peers who look at our work and this could be improved upon. Whereas for a game designer, it's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who all feel more than comfortable sharing their opinions with you on Twitter, on Tumblr, on the comments, on news articles about your stuff, and everything matters. It's not just people. It's not just you and I who are trying to kind of coalesce our thoughts into something more cohesive. It's comments too. In that article posted again by Anthony, the writer of Borderlands 2, he said developers read every single piece of criticism, every single review, every single blog post about it that they can find, including the comments, and so even those can have repercussions. So I think it's just generally a good policy to look at what you put out into the world and try to make it a better place than trying to make it a worse place. And not all opinions are important. I think that's an important thing. You don't have to have your voice heard. That's part of the thing with the whole internet. But those are whole other issues. But I think it's really important that just to acknowledge the work that developers put in to make these experiences that we love, that we talk about. Because even a bad game's worth discussing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even bad games can give. We've got a couple of games out on PC right now that are, broken to the point of being hobbies in their own right. And you look at the way retro games can be fun, even really, really terrible ones. Muscle Bomber would be a particularly notable favorite of mine as a game that is just awful and is so much better. The world is such a better place for having that awful game in it. But as we kind of, move towards the end of our discussion of this article, I want to highlight a quote from DeVille where he says, just go that extra bit to be kind if you can, and to start from a position of kindness, to save all that bile for things that are truly deserving of your rancor, and to make that bile stand for something because it isn't the default. And I think as gamers, we need to take that. We need to start from a position where we are not angry instead of starting angry. Because then our anger will really mean something when we hit something where we really are being swindled, or we're not getting a good experience, and we're being told this is great, and we know it's not. And then our voices will mean a lot more. if we could save that Rancor for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also can't think of a better way to wrap that up. So again, that was an article posted by Jason Schreier on Kotaku. It's what it's like to crunch on a video game. So be sure to check that out. So now that our work's done and logged, let's get into our experimental methods. So in experimental methods, Fliss and I will talk about the video games we've been playing recently. What works, what doesn't, what we're looking forward to. So Fliss, what have you been running this week? What experiments have you been running this week?
Well, I've gone back to the beginning in my experiments, and with all the news about Arkham Knight as a game that I know that no matter what they're charging for the season pass, I will someday want to play, I've gone back to Arkham Asylum and am making a real solid play through it on hard, trying to upgrade my batsuit, my attacks, in the most critically well-planned, well-thought-out way possible. And I'm really, really enjoying going back and playing through that. I've also, of course, been indulging in Hearthstone for far more hours than I should, and deeply enjoying that. What are you working on this week?
Yeah, so we can go a little bit into more depth about the games we've played, but I tried out kind of with the release of Avengers: Age of Ultron. There's this free-to-play action RPG MMO game. Yeah,
dude, real fast, no spoilers. Japan is literally the last country in the world to get Age of Ultron. It's not coming out here until July 4th, and you can bet I will be there at the theater, decked head to toe in Captain America gear for it. But so carry on.
All right, no spoilers. It's good. I've got mixed thoughts about it. We'll have to wait, I guess, until July to talk about it. But yeah, so with the release of that, I got interested in playing a Marvel game, and I'd heard great things about Marvel Heroes 2015, which is it's free to play Diablo-like MMO hybrid made by Gazillion Games, which is a company that's headed up by a former developer for both Diablo and Diablo 2. So I mean, he's got a real track record for work. I heard about him talking on another gaming podcast I listened to. And so I've been trying that out, and I talked about, I've been playing through Shovel Knight, and I beat that recently. But going back to you, so you said you're going through Arkham Asylum. So when is this the first? You're saying you played them back through on hard. Did you play this recently? So what are your thoughts on the general flow of gameplay? How did you like the combat, for instance? I think combat is something that people always talk about in the Arkham games.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not my first playthrough. I've run through it on normal pretty far into it. I didn't actually finish it. I put it down, got distracted by other projects, as happened. So going back to it, I kind of tried to pick up where I left off, and it wasn't feeling right. So I went back and decided to do it right from the beginning on hard, and that's been extremely rewarding. The combat system certainly is more rewarding on hard. Obviously, on hard mode, you lose some of the indicators that tell you when to counter. You also have enemies that are much more aware of how you're hiding. And so this increases the difficulty substantially for both of of the Arkham games' main kinds of missions, right? You have combat missions and predator missions, and those are the challenge modes you see as well, for the most part. And having that increased difficulty makes it really feel like I'm accomplishing something, especially in the predator missions. I find those to be way more fun, the sneaking around, and that also makes the large combat situations that are unavoidable far more satisfying, right? Because I know I've done everything that I could to avoid them. And, the story, of course, is great.
Yeah, so yeah, Rocksteady's take is great in those. And the Predator missions are they're such a rewarding experience. And, before them, I played it when, about a year after it first released, so who knows when that was, like 2008, 2009, something like that. And they more than anything make you feel like Batman, like swooping between those gargoyles and dropping down and incapacitating foes that way. And they nail that Batman feel so great that I couldn't get enough. Now I never really dived much into the challenge. Do you try out those challenge missions at all? So that's one of the things that I kind of played through the game and I kind of had my fill. but I've heard good things about those.
Yeah, I really like them. I used them almost as a training mode when I started because, my first big fight on hard mode, and I was like, oh man, there's no indicator for when to block. I was like, geez, I'm Batman. I just got my butt kicked by like 3 Joker goons. So I went back to those challenges and started playing through them. And I think what it really pushes you to do is refine your skills. It pushes you to make those button presses at exactly the right time, to really make your combat smooth and silky. It teaches you how to not button mash. And to do that in an environment where you're making high scores, where you're unlocking levels of achievements, where you're competing against other players on the leaderboard, is extremely rewarding. I'm a huge fighting game fan, and I think that there's a lot that fighting game trial modes and challenge modes can learn from these Arkham challenge modes, because I think they're an excellent way to really push you to refine your skills.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so you say you haven't beaten it yet, so do you think you're going to make it through the game on hard?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. I'm determined. I'm not giving it up. Check back with me next week. See if it's defeated me by then. But no, I'm going to make it happen.
I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to it. See if you can actually get through it. Because those games get tough, especially in the counters where you have a lot of thugs. One of the issues though I had with Arkham when I played it was just that detective vision. I forget exactly the phrase for it. It's so
detective mode.
It's so powerful that I feel like it detracted, at least, especially from Arkham Asylum, because you pretty much have detective mode on constantly, and you don't get to see the gritty visuals. Just everything is the blue with the orange outlines for people. I don't know if they changed that in hard mode at all, or if you find yourself if that was an issue for you. But that's one of the things that kind of bothered me. The game rewarded you too much for being in detective mode pretty much the entire game.
Yeah, I think detective mode is really a case of you get out of it what you put into it, right? When it comes to these kinds of exploration games where, it's not necessarily open world, but it's got a linear story it wants you to follow, but you do have other places you can go, it can be easy to get lost. I like to tell the story of when I was a kid, playing through Ocarina of Time for the first time and trying to follow the music in the forest and just getting totally turned around for seriously 3 weeks. I couldn't figure out what to do there. And if I'd had a detective mode to go through that, it maybe would have saved my first run through Ocarina of Time.
3 weeks? I think you're a little behind the curve there, Fliss. I think 3 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes. 3 weeks is a little much. So I don't know what you were like as a kid. Maybe there were some struggles you had that I was previously aware of.
No, because look, this is we don't talk about being kind and not raging. It would be spend 10 minutes trying to follow the music and then rage quit and then not pick it up again for another couple days. So don't worry, I was not spending all my free time just wandering around in the woods. Gotta defend my gamer cred here.
And I just pictured 24 hour a day, 21 days of little Fliss trapped in the lost woods.
I'm so lost. These are the lost woods. My soul is trapped. Anyway.
I think to this day your soul is still probably running around the lost woods.
There's a part of my childhood that will never leave the lost woods of Ocarina of Time. Maybe I need to go back there when I get a midlife crisis to rediscover my younger self. Lost.
I don't know.
Confused.
It sounds like a midlife crisis just hearing that song again. Do you like that song? I can't even imagine. Hearing that song for 3 weeks.
It's been enough time.
You've buried it. You've buried it a little deep. You're good. You're good to move forward with your life.
Yeah, it used to be a trigger warning, but now I think I'm okay.
All right, that's good. So the other
my point is,
yeah, go ahead.
If I'd had a detective mode as a kid, where I could have engaged, pressed my left trigger and seen a trail of musical notes, because that's kind of what you see in Arkham Knight when you use detective mode. Or in the Arkham games, when you use detective mode, is you see this kind of floating mystical trail of tobacco particles or whatever, nicotine. You're the actual science guy here, but I think basically what detective mode is it's an easy mode that you can turn on and off, and that's the way I try to treat it. When I walk into an area where there are thugs, sure, I'll scan with detective mode. to find out how many of them there are. But those predator missions, it can be a lot more fun to force yourself to go out of detective mode, especially when you're like attacking somebody, right? Because attacking someone in detective mode just looks so lame compared to the beautiful graphics you get when you're attacking them in the real world.
You don't want to see your wireframe take out their wireframe.
Yeah, man. I know it's hard to have these standards of a game where I want to see, like actual flesh and blood going around, full-bodied pixels.
No, I think we just need to get back to Smash 64. Everything is Polygon Man. Polygon Man versus Polygon Man.
Right, and you have your vaguely animal-shaped Polygon Man and your ball-shaped Polygon Man, and then your Polygon Man with a sword. That was a great game.
Golden times, man. Golden times. So what was the other game you said you've been playing?
Yeah, man, Hearthstone, I can't put it down.
Oh, that's right.
I am I'm not totally free to play anymore. Hearthstone now holds the dubious honor of being the only free to play game I've ever spent money on, and the only game I've ever pre-ordered something on. But Blackrock Mountain's sexy card back seduced me and broke my willpower down. So yeah, I can't stop Hearthstone. If I spend even a day not picking up my gold from challenges, it just feels like a huge waste. I can't stop.
I am in the same boat. I've been playing for over a year now. Yeah, that game is so good. And BlackRock, those boss battles are so fun. I mean, I get the criticisms. The content is a little short, maybe for the money you invest into it, right? If we, like you and I both did, if you pre-order it, is what, $25? I think $25 for the pre-order.
That's right.
Which is a little steep, sure, but I mean, I think the way both you and I look at it as both former Magic players, this is the cheapest card game I've ever played, right? I mean, I've been playing for a year now, and my financial investment into Hearthstone is a little steeper than yours. I won't go into any hard numbers, but I'm certainly past the $100 mark, but it's probably a little bit more than that. But I mean, keep in mind if we were going to like a Friday Night Magic or going to play, and each draft is $15. If you want to make a competitive constructed deck like you can in Hearthstone with the ranked mode, that can cost you several hundred of dollars just to buy the cards to play one deck. And so that's the way I like viewing it, because Hearthstone, for the most part, I mean, it's got its trappings like any free-to-play game has. But for the most part, Blizzard has done a great job at giving really as much content as possible to the player without charging them for it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you about the card game and about what it delivers for your money. I mean, I'm sure you remember it, but, we spent my 17th birthday at a mall holding our own booster draft. And that booster box alone was probably more money than you've spent on Hearthstone for that one day because, we were huge nerds who had nothing better to do than sit in a mall and draft Magic.
Yeah, sure. That booster box is more than I've spent.
We're not the benefit of the doubt here.
We're not going
Play to win, pay to win.
Hey, and my Control Warrior deck is on point. I think I'm only missing. I think I have something like 39 legendaries or something that's like I'm not ever at a loss. It's an investment. Hearthstone's going to be around.
Wait, how many legendaries was that, Alex?
39.
Hey, Alex, do you know how many legendaries I have?
The best one, Lorewalker Cho. Duh.
Oh God, he sits there taunting me in my collection. Too valuable to be dusted. Not good enough to be played.
That's not true. You're a liar, and I can prove it. Blackrock Mountain, you now have 6 legendaries.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Hey, Tharson's good for control decks. Chromagus seems to be pretty decent. Maybe. I mean, Ren seems pretty bad, and Farian doesn't seem great, and what's the last one? What is that last one? The week 2 legendary. Yeah, either way, you've got a couple legendaries now.
It clearly wasn't great because neither of us can remember.
Yeah, that's true. But no, it's good. Yeah, no. Hearthstone is good.
The Magus, right? 9/7 turn your hero into
yes
Ragnaros.
Major Domo Executus.
Yes,
No wonder
there
I
we go.
forgot. No wonder I
Yes.
forgot. But Hearthstone is going to be around for such a long time for both of us, and I really don't see it going anywhere. And I mean, neither of us are World of Warcraft aficionados, but every time I see people talking about it, there's so much content, from the raids that are making their way into the being Hearthstone adventures to even, I mean, there's still 2 more playable heroes that aren't in Hearthstone, the Death Knight and the Monk. And so, I mean, those are ripe for, addition.
Yeah, this is something that you mentioned in your excellent post about declaring Hearthstone your game of the year. But I think Blizzard really needs to be praised for how accessible they've made the story of Hearthstone. You don't need to have been a World of Warcraft person to really appreciate it and get into it. So I'm excited to see what more they'll bring to us.
Yeah, no, I kind of like it too because I don't know what to expect coming up with these next single player expansions or stuff, and they've been doing a really good job. So, but yeah, on my front, so I told you I've been trying out Marvel Heroes 2015, and I'm actually been pleasantly surprised. Again, there's a lot wrong with the free to play model, but I think. For at least, I've played about 10 hours now. I think Gazillion does a pretty good job at making Marvel Heroes relatively accessible. So just to go through it, you play as it's a mashup of every single Marvel universe. And I don't know if you've played any of the Diablo games, but it's kind of this isometric viewpoint, top-down-ish. You get to choose your starting Marvel hero and get to play through different scenarios, and villains are on the loose. There's a little bit of MMO aspects. There's a central hub area where you can talk with other people and party up with them. I think there are these little mini raid-like things, which are for endgame content that I haven't gotten to. And a lot of the story chapters, they take place in these world maps that you will run around with other people on that map, and you can see them and do other stuff. But they're separate mission environments. But it's been fun. It's the same kind of thing as Diablo, so the action is fun. You get to meet giant mobs of enemies and kind of clear them with your attacks and your powers. I'm a big fan of the game because my favorite Marvel character, I don't know if you know, is Taskmaster, which is a pretty obscure one. Ever since he was featured in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I've been in love with the character. And you can play as him in this game. So that was the first thing I did once I saved up enough currency was I bought Taskmaster.
Is that still your avatar over on PSN? Will we still see you identified as Taskmaster?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I bought a stupid PSN avatar of Taskmaster. I have my girlfriend Justine. She got me a figurine of Taskmaster. So I love the guy. He's cool, and so you can play as him, and that's fun. And I don't even know how many playable characters are in the game, like 40 or something.
But would you buy a Taskmaster amiibo?
I would. I get it now. It all makes sense. Yeah, I would definitely buy a Taskmaster amiibo. That'd be awesome. Yeah, but the gameplay is fun. It's just very standard Diablo. The enemies are pretty easy to kill. The loot explodes out of them.
How would you say it compares to earlier Marvel games like Ultimate Alliance? Because that was a very similar style of kind of top-down gameplay, right?
Yeah, so it's similar. I think the same kind of isometric viewpoint is there, and the same kind of notion of teaming up is there. But I think the action abilities with cooldowns, I think the insistence on all these different currencies, I think with the loot that explodes out, the loot rarity, the gearing up your character and all their body armor slot, their head armor slot, their secondary weapon, their primary weapon, and getting increasing rarity, that's so much that Diablo loot fest, grind fest that certainly appeals to me. I played through with Justine, and we played through Diablo 3, and that was such a fun experience, and I'm getting a lot of the same vibes here, and we've been trying to play together on the computer, but we only have one mouse, and so it's kind of you can't really play an action RPG like Marvel Heroes or like a Diablo without a mouse. So that's something we're interested in doing. But no, it's been good. There's certainly complaints, right? Because it's a free-to-play game, so coming to the game, you're met with a sea of information. There's a sea of there's 12 different currencies, like all free-to-play games have. You can collect one currency but not have the right currency for something else. You have to buy extra storage space. You can start you can start, I think, as one of 10 heroes that you can level up to level 10, but then you can't level any of them up beyond 10 until you unlock one of them, and that's the only one you can unlock to get up to level 60. You can purchase, the only currency that allows you to purchase new characters and costumes you have to spend real money on, except you can collect these items called, I think, Eternity Splinters, which drop at a rate of 1 every 6 to 8 minutes, but it costs, like, at minimum 200 of those to unlock a new character. So, I mean, it's slow. It's not a game where you're going to acquire every hero very quickly. You're going to have to grind it up. But, I mean, to be fair, each hero kind of plays pretty differently, and if you're getting them up to level 60, I can imagine you probably have enough splinters to buy a new character by the time you've maxed out one. And so, I mean, there's certainly free-to-play trappings, and the graphics aren't great, but I mean, I've been having a fun time. It's been a long time since I played Diablo, and I just wanted to jump in and see what it had to offer, and I've been pretty pleasantly surprised. It runs pretty smoothly. It's pretty fun to play. It kind of scratches those same, like, oh, is this sword better than my sword? Let's compare. Oh, its attack rate is a little bit higher, but it boosts this skill that I don't use very much, and maybe I'll keep it. And so, I mean, I don't intend on dropping any money on this one, but I'll see where the game takes me. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if I play through the story. I'm going to try and get through the main story as Taskmaster, and then go from there. But you see people reviewing this game on Steam who have 400 hours, 900 hours, 1,200 hours in this kind of game. So it's one of those games that it keeps on giving. It gives as much as you want from it. And it's one of those games that, there's no way you'll complete all of its content with all of its characters. It's, financially and, time-wise, just almost an impossible feat.
Well, man, that sounds pretty cool. I mean, it certainly sounds like something that I should be looking into and should be giving a try. Do you happen to know if my favorite Marvel character of all time, the Thing, is a part of it?
The Thing,
that Fantastic Four.
Oh my god! For starters, why the heck are the Fantastic Four like your favorite Marvel property? They're like the worst Marvel property, and the Thing is the worst.
You take that back. You take that back.
I'm never taking that back. And the Thing is the worst among the Fantastic Four.
Whoa! We don't even have time. That's a whole other episode about all the reasons you're wrong, and there are many. But no, I mean, come on. Just tell me, is the Thing part of the game? You don't have to like him. You're free to be wrong.
He is, in fact, a playable character, and I think he's a cheap one, because guess what? No one wants to play as the Thing.
Well, lucky me for having better taste than other people.
I've also heard he's a bad character, but I mean, I don't know about the game to know which characters are good. Apparently Taskmaster's not very good either, but...
Well, I mean, to be fair, in Marvel Ultimate Alliance, the Thing was never very good. He just had loads of health and could occasionally punch something. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he was nerfed. For some reason, there are all these people who don't like him. I don't know. You'll have to try and explain that to me someday.
He's a talking rock. I think
he has feelings. He has feelings about being a rock.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a topic for another time. But yeah, no, he's playable. I mean, there's characters. It's insane the amount of matchup of Marvel characters. You have every single Avenger. You have, like, every X-Men that was ever popular you have in the game. You've got the small characters like Taskmaster. You've got Guardians. You've got Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon. You've got...
Okay, well, you're singing my song now. Rocket Raccoon, hey.
Like, you want to, think about Marvel. You want to play Gambit? Gambit's in the game. You want to play Cable? Cable's in the game. You want to play Swagnito? He's in the game. You want to play as Taskmaster? He's in the game. Daredevil. The Thing. There's so much. It's a crazy amount of characters.
You can criticize me for loving the Thing, but I think you're one of the only people who wants to play Taskmaster. I don't know. Folks out there will have to tell me whether I'm wrong about this. We can have a great debate about the Thing and Taskmaster.
All right. If you have opinions on this, email us at impactfactor@gmail.com and let us know how much the Thing sucks, how great Taskmaster is. I've seen one other person playing Taskmaster. One.
What my esteemed colleague meant to say is that we really want to hear from you. We want to know what you thought about the show. We want to hear what you think about games. We want to hear about all the reasons that you love the Thing, all the reasons that you still love the Fantastic Four in spite of their terrible movies. And we want to hear from you and all your thoughts. And it's hard to believe now that our first show is in fact coming to an end. but I hope you've had as much fun as I have. Please keep in touch. You can find me on Twitter at the C Fliss. That's at TheCFliss. I try to keep up a steady stream of pictures of Japanese scenery, food, and of course, all the games I love. And I'd love to have your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks everyone for spending time with us. We'll have to get into this Marvel debate at another time in our last section, which we call errata. But the Impact Factor is an extension of my blog about video games. It's theimpactfactor.blogspot.com. Check there every Tuesday for a new article or review, and sometimes a special article, and every Friday for my curation of the best news items and editorial pieces from around the web and gaming. You can follow me at Twitter at Alex Samocha. That's Alex S.A. Mocha, like the coffee. Please, as Fliss said, I'm going to emphasize again, send us any comments and suggestions for the podcast at impactfactor@gmail.com. So, until next time, make an impact.